Hello and welcome to State Matters. As the ranking minority member on the state's Joint Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Culture, it has become clear during the pandemic our tourism, arts, and culture have become negatively affected in our community. Last month on the show, we discussed how tourism will recover with the Executive Director of the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, Executive Director Keiko Matsuda-Oro. Today, we'll discuss how the arts and culture will recover. I can't think of a better person to have this discussion with than the new Executive Director of the Mass Cultural Council, Mr. Michael Bobbitt. Michael, how are you today?
I'm very good, Rep. Thanks so much for having me come here. It's good to be virtually in Plymouth again.
Well, it's good to have you on. I know you just started the job back in February and during the pandemic. And before we get into that and why you came to the job, I found your bio fascinating. Can you go through a little bit of who you are for the folks? A lot of folks here probably don't know who you are, but love to know who you are and just go through your background and what you've done in the past. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so I did. I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment taking a job during a pandemic where an arts and culture sector is being devastated, but I did. I came to Mass Cultural Council on February 1st. Actually, I moved up here 2 years ago to run a theater in Watertown, Massachusetts. And in the past 15 years prior to that, I worked in theater as an artistic director in the Washington, D.C. area. But my love for the arts goes back to my days as a wee lad where I was in the plays in grade school. And when I was, I guess in third grade, I picked up the trumpet and dance and pursued those two as a career. I went to college as a trumpet major, studying classical trumpet, and then left that and went back to the dance world and started trying to be a ballet dancer. Someday when we meet in person, you'll see that I'm 6'2", so a ballet dancer was not in the cards for me. So I shifted over to musical theater, and musical theater kind of was my life for a while. I had some great opportunities to direct and choreograph at some of the DC region's biggest and best theaters, and then move on to theater leadership. I even worked at the Smithsonian for a while in their children's theater program. So pretty busy career, and I'm happy to be here in Massachusetts and in this job.
What were some of the jobs you did in the theaters that you worked at?
So I've worked as a director, the person that sort of oversees the whole production. I've also worked as a choreographer with my dance background. I've choreographed a lot of musicals and plays. And then I often worked as a playwright, which is writing plays. I have maybe 10 to 12 plays I've written, and several are published. Wow. I built a reputation of writing plays of big brands. So I have written a musical called Garfield, the Musical with Catitude, which I wrote with Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield.
Love it.
I'm going to be premiering Make Way for Ducklings soon, which is a Massachusetts story. I also I co-wrote a musical with Bob Marley called Bob Marley's Three Little Birds. Now, he wasn't alive when I co-wrote with him, but his music is in my play. And so, but I had a chance to work on a lot of big brands, and those are a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's your favorite moment doing all that?
I think it was, well, there are two. So one was when the Bob Marley play went to play at the New Victory Theater in New York City, an off-Broadway theater. The opening night of that was fascinating. There were about 15 members of the Marley family and a whole theater of 1,500 kids filled. But the other thing that was a favorite moment was I pioneered at my theater in DC sensory-friendly performances, which were theatrical plays that were adjusted for kids with autism, Asperger's, and other sensory issues. Disney's The Lion King and a group called Theatrical Development Fund heard about this and asked me to come to New York to consult with them on doing a sensory-friendly performance of The Lion King. So Broadway's first production of The Lion King that was adjusted for kids with autism and Asperger's, I had something to do with that. So sitting in the audience with this adjusted performance for that opening where there were 1,600 students and all those puppets coming down the aisles, I cried like a baby. I literally cried through that whole performance.
That is awesome. That's awesome. All right, so now let's get to the question. Why would you take a job in Massachusetts as Executive Director of the Mass Arts and Culture in the middle of a pandemic? We're glad you did, but what brought you to it?
I don't know. I think the last 15 years of my life, I have been working in organizations that may have been in crisis. Not that the Cultural Council was in crisis, but certainly the field was in crisis. And I have been blessed with the ability to see organizations through crisis. And so this seemed to be a great opportunity. And also, I think the thing that I love about Mass Cultural Council, I spent the last 15, 20 years just working in theater as a performer, director, choreographer, as I mentioned. But here was a chance to go back to some things that I loved that I hadn't had a chance to play in. So the dance world and the music world, you can see that I'm an art collector. I had a lot of fun in high school working on art. And so here's a chance to do all of those things at the same time. I also have been obsessed with, even as a producer for theater, I liked being outside of the room, the rehearsal room, making room and finding resources so that artists can be artists, as opposed to being in the room as an artist. And here I can do this on a macro level. So I'm very excited about it. I also moved up here a couple of summers ago and just fell in love with the state. So to be able to connect with the whole state and not just the area that I was in has been fascinating.
Where did you grow up, Michael?
The Washington, D.C. area, born and raised in lower Northwest D.C. near Howard University. Yeah. And then before I moved here, my family and I were living in Bethesda, near NIH.
Nice, nice. So for people out there that are watching this, what is the Mass Cultural Council? Can you explain what it is and really what's the state agency, who do they serve?
So we are really the state agency that appropriates money through taxpayer dollars that we are given by the legislature to arts and culture institutions, creative sciences, and also individual artists. We do this in a number of ways. We have several different grant programs, about 20 plus. We also offer wraparound services, so webinars and workshops with consultants to help the field get better at the work that they're doing so that they can just focus on doing great work and building audiences. We get some appropriations from the National Endowment for the Arts and a little bit of private contributions, but most of that money comes in and goes straight back out to the field. So we are the agency that really supports the whole sector, arts and culture and creative sciences.
And the legislatures have been very good to Mass Art Cultural Fund. I think we put in like $20 million this past budget year.
Yeah, you gave us a $1.8 million increase this year. With the House and the Senate have approved $20 million. Waiting for the governor to sign that off.
We're getting there.
That's the next step. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. So how have you found the?
You asked.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
You asked about who we serve. So we really serve everyone in the state. Anyone who consumes art, you are somewhat indirectly being served by Mass Cultural Council, and but directly we really focus on the artists and the institutions.
So how have you found the transition from the nonprofit world, nonprofit theaters, into the state, into a state agency? How has that transition been for you? And what do you see as the differences, the good and the bad, I guess?
Sure. So during my before I started, I took a major crash course in political science because I haven't really focused on that part of my job. I've had to have relationships with legislators and being involved in the community when you run an arts organization. But knowing that I was going to be deeply involved in legislation, I did a lot of YouTubing to remind myself about how politics and state government works. So that was a big change for me. A couple other big changes were, when you work in the theater, most of the work we do is nights and evenings and weekends. And so working in state government, I have evenings and weekends fairly free. And that's a new bit for me. Also, as a nonprofit, you spend most of your time fundraising. And so my fundraising is a little bit different. It's advocating for the whole field as opposed to fundraising for specific projects. And then the other big difference is that I have a larger staff, which is kind of nice because that means we can get more work done. And the nonprofit model can be a tenuous model because you're always working hard to bring in money, to bring in audiences. So there's a little bit of calm, but also now as a new person in the agency, I'm trying to figure out exactly what the agency needs and what the sector needs.
Yeah. And help me understand too, because this isn't an agency that's like under anybody. There's like a board that you have that you report to that kind of runs the agency. Is that correct? Can you talk about
Yeah,
the
so we're an
structure? Yeah.
independent state agency, which means yeah, we're an independent state agency, which means we have a little bit of flexibility in doing what we want to do. So we're not under the executive branch. Um, and then the governor appoints a council. So I have council members, and ideally we want council members that represent all the counties in the state. So I have, I think up to 19, but I think right now we have 16 or 17 council members.
Okay.
And they really work as advisors and to really sort of help us with making sure that we're doing what we say we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. How often do they meet?
4 times a year, usually one big retreat and then 3 meetings. And all of our meetings are open, so anyone can join our meetings and see what we're discussing.
Yeah, great. So you've been there, roughly 4 months now. What are some of the major goals that you have for the agency that you're looking at?
A lot of those are still being formulated. Hard on Zoom to meet all the constituents that you want to meet, but having as many meetings as I can. And now that we are vaccinated and things are safer, starting to travel around the state to meet with people on their turf to really find out exactly what they need my help with as I start working with the staff and the council to pull together the plan. But at the moment, we are working on next year's plan for what kind of workshops we're going to offer and how we're going to appropriate the money that we hopefully will be getting. And also we're working on our racial equity plan to really make sure that we are making sure that the dollars that we get from the taxpayers are being distributed equitably.
Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because that's really important. How do you plan on doing that, and what are some thoughts around that?
So I have about 8 years of racial equity training and usage, and been consulting with lots of groups across the whole country and how to build a racial equity plan. And we have a pretty inclusive process for doing that. So we invited council members and staff members to submit action steps that they thought we would work on. And then the whole staff kind of not the whole staff, a small race equity task force worked on putting all of our action steps into SMART outcome goals so that they're measurable and they're time-based and they're relevant to what we're working on. But there are a couple of things we're doing. One is an internal look to make sure that anytime we're in a room together making a decision, we are making sure that we have enough representation in the room so that we have a varied perspective. And also to really focus on those people who have been historically underfunded, and putting them first at the top of the funding mechanism. And then the other part is really helping our organizations figure out what this sort of world is, what anti-racism and racial equity means through training programs, and helping them figure out how they can also make sure their programs and their services are equitable as well. So it's a multi-pronged plan. We hope to have it out by August or September, and then people can offer feedback.
That's terrific. That's really great to hear. Thank you so much for talking about that and for doing that. Tell me about so with COVID, when I said we had Keiko Oral on last month to talk about tourism and the effects from COVID. What's the impact been in Massachusetts on the cultural sector?
Been devastating. I've been borrowing the phrase from my friends in California that have been calling their COVID issues a cultural depression. I think it's similar here in the States. So we sent out 5 surveys during the year, and the last one that we got back came back in March with some devastating figures. One was that we lost about 30,000 jobs. We had 71,000 the year before, and so almost half of our jobs have gone away.
Is that right?
So that's hard. Two, the number that was reported was $588 million in losses. And that's really only those people that responded to the survey. So there's more people that didn't respond to the survey, and certainly a lot of for-profits that we don't really serve. So the hit to the sector, I imagine, is up in the billions, and it's going to take a lot of work to get back there. We had, these poor cultural workers that are gig workers reported that a third of their income was gone. So a third of their income, and we all know that when you work as a gig worker or an individual artist, you're scrambling to pull together enough work to survive on. So losing a third of that was devastating. I've heard anecdotes that people have left the field, which is a big threat to the state, because we don't want these great artists to leave the state. Because one of the things that makes Massachusetts amazing is the arts and culture sector, and the amount of economic impact that we have on the state. The amount of money we put into the GDP is pretty substantial. Beyond the money that comes from income tax, you can think about, even Keiko would probably tell you this, but you can think about what happens when you consume art. When you go see a concert, you might get your hair done and your nails done and buy a new dress and go to dinner and drive and park or use gas. That's money going out to other parts of the sector. And maybe afterwards you go to the bar to have a drink. So those industries have been hit hard because we have been shut down. First to close, last to open. It's going to take a while before I think we're back up and running fully.
Yeah, I think in discussion we had with Keiko and C. Plymouth, which is our RTC here in Plymouth County, I think they're talking maybe 2, 3, 4 years before there's a full recovery. Are you thinking the same thing? Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, I imagine. Yeah, everything from consumer concern about returning back to viewing or consuming art in a closed space, to organizations that had more than a year and a half of no income, trying to make their spaces COVID safe and add equipment so that they can go more digital. It's going to take us a while to get there.
Yeah. Michael, how many staff do you have approximately?
We have 31, including me.
Okay, and then the 19 members of the board. So what is it collectively what is it collectively that the Mass Cultural Council is doing to, to address the recovery? What are some thoughts, some ideas, and short-term and long-term?
Yeah. Well, we're sharing information that we receive from around the state for organizations to look at how they can make their organizations more safe. We're doing our best to get as much money as we can from the state to distribute back out to the field. Some of that we were hoping to come from the governor's bond budget. We got some money, not all that we had hoped for. And then our really biggest hope, where we can really use everyone's help, is in the allocations of the ARPA monies. We have put in a request via Senator Kennedy, a bill that he sponsored, to get $200 million from the ARPA so that we can redistribute back out to the field. That would do a lot to, as I call it, stop the bleeding, put a tourniquet on the bleeding. It's not going to help us with growth. It'll help us with maybe recovery. But we'll keep hammering things and keep working hard to find resources to make everyone whole and really start looking at what growth looks like beyond COVID.
So can you explain for the folks watching ARAP what that is?
Acronyms. There's so many acronyms in government. The American Rescue Plan Act.
There you go.
I did it.
I was testing your knowledge.
I did it.
So what that is, that's one-time money that we got from the federal government that is one-time monies that we're going to be given to different, state agencies, groups around the state to help them with, to stop the bleeding is the best way to put that. I agree with that. That's good. At least you're getting something to stop the bleeding. What do you think?
I hope so. I mean, the governor's suggestion yesterday was a little disappointing. So we're hoping we can change his mind a little bit on how much money and how it's being allocated.
We may be able to help as state legislators.
I hope so. I'm hoping so. Good.
So that's the short one. What are the thoughts for the long run to try to get? It sounds like it's trying to get people back into the workforce. Artists and people like that. And then how do you get the engagement of people to come back and start touring museums and art places, et cetera?
Yeah, well, you and your family should come to every show because you'll feel like half the house. That's a large family there. I mean, that's one of the big things. We really want as many people to come back. I mean, I know that organizations are working very hard to make sure their spaces are safe. So hopefully people are getting vaccinated. If you want to consume art again and you still don't feel comfortable, you certainly have the option of wearing masks or double wearing masks, but that's going to be one part of it. The second part is creatively thinking about how we can create more jobs. I've been reading reports all over the country about programs that states and cities have created to get work for artists, like outdoor murals and repainting mailboxes and things like that, just to give more work to artists. But I'm part of a commission that was part of the capital bond plan, and we have been really working hard to come up with a bunch of ideas. And some of the even longer term things, like investing in arts education to make sure that every kid goes to 1 or 2 field trips a year, but also make sure that arts curriculum is on every single district in the state, so that really we get all the young kids consuming art so that they can become arts for lifelong patrons of the arts, or even artists themselves. Some of that will have a big effect on how we restore. The other thing I will say is that I've been reading lots of reports about cities that have been devastated by something or another financially, like New Orleans and Katrina. And the thing that brought New Orleans back was the decision to center the jazz festival in their tourism plan. That brought a lot of people back, and then they were able to sort of reopen well. And then I go back to the late 70s and 80s with the I Love New York campaign, which came out of New York looking at bankruptcy. And that, if you remember those ads, those were Dancing Cats and Chorus Boys and Liza Minnelli in the middle of Times Square, focused on Broadway. And that's what turned things around for them. So I appealed to the state to really think about how arts and culture can really help to bring money back into the state and people back into the state. I don't know if you know the statistics, but $919 billion put into the US GDP, which is more than agriculture and construction and education. So we can do a lot. The arts can do a lot to help restore things.
Yeah, yeah. You know, here in Plymouth, I don't know if you've met Lee Filson or not. She's the executive director of C Plymouth, the RTC that I was talking about. And she was instrumental in New Orleans. She was there when all that happened. She was instrumental in bringing it back. Yeah. So that may be a good connection to kind of talk to someday. When you come to Plymouth, I'm inviting you to Plymouth. We'll take a tour around. We'll meet with her and some other folks as well. But she'd be instrumental in talking about recovery. You know, because it is important to the Commonwealth for revenue. You know, we are I think the revenue is the 3rd highest is tourism, arts, and culture. Or at least pre-pandemic it was, and we need to kind of bring that back. Speaking of New York, I actually saw an ad the other day of I Love New York. The campaign's coming back again. Yeah. So it was interesting to actually see that. Very simple.
It worked really well, and it's super simple campaign, and it worked really well. And I, before the pandemic, certainly anyone going to New York, the first question you asked them was, "What were you going to go see?" And so that's what we want people to do. When they come to the state, we have to say, hey, go to arts and culture, because there's awesome stuff here.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I love the background you have, and you just mentioned about art. So tell me about your favorite work of art. And did you do some of these paintings, did you say?
I did not. Okay. I wouldn't call myself an artist now, but there's a right over my right shoulder, this one, and then the one above him with the orange reddish person. That's by an artist named Kari Turner, and I've been collecting his work lately. So I think that's some of my favorite art right now. I'm obsessed with this artist.
Yeah, terrific. It's beautiful. It's all of it is. All right, let's play some other games here. What's your favorite play?
I really love, I just reread Terrence McNally's Angels in America. I thought it was just so ahead of its time and pointed and beautiful and artistic. So I think it's one of my favorite plays.
Okay. How about TV show?
At the end of the day, after I've been in Zoom meetings and thinking and visioning, I just want to enjoy something a little kitschy. So I actually enjoy RuPaul's Drag Race. And I find myself like just watching it on repeat all the time. It's just fun. It's just
Donna's
fun.
raising her hands in the air here in the studio. She's a fan too.
It's a good TV show. Oh, good. Oh, good. We'll have to do a Zoom watch party, Donna.
Yeah. How about favorite musical composition?
So a couple of things. Again, as I end my day, especially when I'm in the car, I tend to put on rap music because I grew up with rap music, and so and part of it as a playwright, I'm just fascinated. Get rid of the violence and the misogyny, but I'm fascinated by the use of language in rap music and how they spin words and make up new words, which I think is just fascinating. But also, like, if I need to get the heebie-jeebies out or get the angst out, I will put on Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, which I became acquainted with when I was a high schooler playing the trumpet. I was in a program with the National Symphony Orchestra and got to play in a rehearsal with the National Symphony Orchestra, the Firebird Suite. So I'm fascinated by it. And also, when I studied at the Dance Theater of Harlem, it was one of their best dances. So I got to learn a little bit of that dance.
Can you go any more opposite of music from one end to the other?
I'm blessed with the eclecticism.
Yeah. So let me test your knowledge a little bit about Plymouth. I know you've been to Plymouth a couple times. What do you know about Plymouth?
Well, I know it was one of the first settlements. The last time I was there, I remember seeing the Rock.
Mm-hmm. Were you impressed with the Rock, by the way?
The statue and the waterfront. I was.
Okay.
I mean, because you read about it.
Most people are not that impressed by it.
So it's a small rock. I was expecting a bigger rock, but but also, like, when I brought when my friends came to visit me in DC and I took them to the White House, they was like, "That's the White House? I'm from Europe. Have you seen our castles?" So I'm okay with that. But the first time I was there, I came through with my son, who was, I think, probably 7 or 8, maybe a little bit younger. But we went to I don't know if it's the Plymouth Plantation, but it's a recreation of the Pilgrim Village.
Yeah, it's now called the Plymouth Patuxent. Yes.
Okay, great. So we went there, and at the time he was really obsessed with Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Oh, yeah. So he carried around this little action figure everywhere he went. And after we left, we drove maybe 3 hours away, and he realized that he left his Shark Boy at the plantation. And so he made such a bloody scream that the only thing we could do to calm him down was to turn around and go back 3 hours to get it. And luckily it was still there, so we were able to do it. So I have a strong fondness to Plymouth, and I can't wait to come see it again.
Yeah, we're going to have you around. We're going to tour you around. We'll take you to Plymouth Patuxent as well. We'll take you back there. We'll take you a few other places and meet some people. So, Michael, I want to, real quickly in finishing up, how can the viewers get in touch with Mass Cultural Council?
We have a website. It's massculturalcouncil.org, and we also are on social media. So it'd be great to stay in touch with us. We send out lots of advocacy alerts so that all of you viewers can bother the rep with lots of letters saying, "Do whatever Michael Bobbitt tells you to do."
All right, it's time to end the show now.
So we would love to.
No, Michael, thank you so very much, and I will have Betty DeBenedictis from my office get a hold of your office, and we'll invite you to Plymouth this summer, and we'll tour around places that will be an interest to you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Really
very excited about that.
Thank you.
Really great talking to you.
Yeah. We hope you at home enjoyed today's show. And thank you to the staff here, Dave and Nate and Donna and Mark, for putting this together at PAC TV, and for what you do for the entire community. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on State Matters.